All right, let's dive into the sacred geometry thing. You sent me tons of stuff about it. Notes, study guides, even some lectures. Looks like everyone thinks there's this like hidden language out there.
Yeah, it's definitely got people's attention.
So you're saying there's this universal language, but how do we even start to get it if it doesn't use words?
Think of it more like symbols, numbers, and shapes. It's not like our languages. This stuff is everywhere.
Okay, so we're not reading some old book. We're cracking the code of the universe itself. That sounds pretty cool.
Exactly.
Now, your notes mention sacred numbers. What makes them so special?
Well, it's kind of like numerology.
Right.
But sacred geometry is more about these numbers that keep showing up. Like 524, 432, 720. They show up all over nature, old buildings, even time.
Like a puzzle with a secret message. Give me an example. How does one of these numbers unlock something?
Okay, think about 144. It's not just how many square inches are in a foot. It's also in old buildings and how different cultures mark time.
That one number popping up everywhere is kind of freaky. Makes you wonder if it's more than just chance. What other examples are there?
Well, there's this idea of cubing the sphere with the moon. You know how the moon's diameter is 2,160 miles? That's also the number of degrees in a cube.
So the moon's like some cosmic box that survived all the bad stuff that happened?
That's the idea.
The moon as a cosmic box. That's wild. Okay, so how do these numbers connect to time?
That's where things get interesting. Ancient cultures, like the Sumerians and Vedic traditions, they used sacred numbers to measure huge chunks of time. Like the Sumerian king list, it talks about kings ruling for crazy long periods.
Thousands of years. That's more like a myth than history. Do you really think they meant that literally?
Maybe, maybe not. Those super long reigns could be symbols for pieces of a bigger cycle called a yuga. That's 432,000 years.
432,000 years. That's a long time. Did anyone else use that number for time?
Oh yeah, the Vedic traditions too. They have these yugas or ages, and guess what? All their calculations use multiples of 432,000.
So we've got all these cultures, totally different places and times, using the same number. Weird, right? Did they figure this out on their own, or was there some shared knowledge from way back?
People have been asking that question for ages.
Yeah.
And it's not just them. Even the Mayan calendar, all those cycles and calculations about the stars, they use these same numbers too.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. You mentioned Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid. What makes them important for sacred geometry?
They're proof that ancient people knew a lot about measuring things. They were way ahead of their time. And what's even cooler is they used those sacred numbers in geometry we've been talking about.
So it's not just about how big they are, but the exact measurements and shapes they used.
Exactly. Take Stonehenge. We think of the mile as a Roman thing, 1,000 paces. But Stonehenge is older than the Romans, and it uses the mile. So maybe the mile was around way before them.
That changes history as we know it. It's amazing how a simple measurement like the mile can connect us to the past. What about the Great Pyramid?
Now that one's even more mind-blowing. People think its measurements and angles actually encode secrets about the Earth's size. Some say they were as accurate as our satellites today.
You're telling me the ancient Egyptians knew things about the Earth that we only just figured out?
It's a wild thought, isn't it? And that's what I love about sacred geometry. It makes us rethink everything we know about ancient civilizations. It opens up a world of possibilities.
I'm starting to see how these buildings aren't just impressive, they're like libraries of ancient knowledge written in numbers and shapes. But how did they do it? What tools did they even have?
That's where ancient metrology comes in. It's like measuring, but not just about lengths and weights. It's about seeing the connections and proportions in everything, the way everything fits together.
So it was about more than measuring things. It was about understanding the rules of those things. Are you saying they had a better grasp of the universe than we do now?
It's a good question. Remember that moon example, cubing the sphere? They didn't just measure the moon. They connected it to a cube. It's like they saw the moon as part of this cosmic dance of shapes and numbers.
It's beautiful, but man, my head's spinning. We've only just scratched the surface here.
Totally agree. We've got lots more to explore. But before we go further, your study guide mentioned gematria. Ever heard of it?
Nope, gematria is all new to me. What's that about, and how does it fit in here?
So gematria is basically giving numbers to letters, like in Hebrew or Greek. It's like a code hidden inside words.
A code inside language. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work?
Say you take the Greek word for truth, aletheia, add up the numbers for each letter, and you get 72.
Wait, 72, that's one of those sacred numbers we keep seeing.
Right. And there's more. The word for conception, katabale, adds up to 432. That one's all over solar and Vedic time cycles.
So language, numbers, and time are all connected in this crazy web. It's mind-blowing.
And that's the magic of sacred geometry. It shows how everything is connected. But it also makes you wonder, is this just playing with numbers? Or is there something deeper going on here, some secret meaning hidden in language that we're just starting to rediscover?
You've given me a lot to think about. Gematria adds a whole other level to this. But where do global catastrophes fit into all of this? Your study guide mentioned them happening in cycles. What's that all about?
Great question, and a perfect way to start our next chapter. Basically, people have noticed that big disasters in Earth's history seem to happen in patterns that match up with those ancient wisdom traditions. Remember the Great Year, that 25,920-year cycle?
Yeah, that's the one where the Earth wobbles a bit and changes which star is north, right?
Exactly. And it seems like certain points in that Great Year are more likely to have big changes, some of them really bad, like the Younger Dryas event, the sudden cold snap about 12,960 years ago.
Hold on, 12,960 years ago, that's almost exactly half of the Great Year.
You got it. And there are other examples too, like the last ice age, the Wisconsin one. It peaked about 26,000 years ago, right around the start of another Great Year cycle.
So there's this cosmic clock that controls not just time, but also when bad stuff happens. That's a lot to take in.
Definitely makes you think, right? Makes you wonder about our place in the grand scheme of things.
This is all so fascinating, but also kind of scary. If these cycles are real, what does it mean for humanity? Are we just along for the ride, or can we actually do something about it?
Those are the big questions, and they deserve a deeper dive. We'll get into those next time. It looks like we've reached a good stopping point for now.
I can't wait to see where this goes next. We'll be back soon to untangle more of this ancient wisdom. Welcome back. Last time, things got pretty heavy talking about all those catastrophes.
Yeah, it did definitely get you thinking. But before we go full doomsday, let's go back to that universal language idea. We talked about how ancient people use numbers and shapes to record stuff about the earth and time, but where can we actually see this language, like in the world around us?
Good question. So far, it's all been old books and buildings. Is this something we can see in our everyday lives?
Oh, absolutely. Sacred geometry says these patterns and proportions aren't just ideas, they're like built into nature. From tiny atoms to huge galaxies, it's all connected.
So there's a hidden order to everything. Like the universe is talking to us with shapes and numbers. How do we learn to understand it? What should we be looking for?
Ancient people just knew this stuff, and they built their lives and their buildings around it. One example is the 5 Platonic solids.
Right, we talked about those. The tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, icosahedron, and dodecahedron. Why are those shapes so important in sacred geometry?
What's special is they're the only 3D shapes where all the sides are the same and all the edges are the same length. There's only 5 shapes in the entire universe that can do that.
Pretty exclusive club. And didn't Plato think those shapes represented the basic elements of the universe?
Exactly. He thought the tetrahedron was fire, the cube was earth, the octahedron was air, the icosahedron was water, and the dodecahedron was like the cosmos itself.
So they weren't just shapes, they were symbols for what reality is made of. It's like a visual language for the universe. But do these shapes actually exist in nature, or are they just made up?
That's the cool part. They're not just made up, they're everywhere in nature. Like water, its molecules are based on the tetrahedron.
So that ancient geometry is built into the smallest pieces of stuff. That's wild. What other examples are there?
Well, soul crystals are shaped like cubes. And that dodecahedron, the cosmos shape, it pops up in weird places, like the way sunflower seeds are arranged or how energy flows in a torus, which is like a donut shape.
Okay, now I'm seeing it. It's everywhere. It's like the universe is talking to us with geometry. But how did ancient cultures figure this out without all the tools we have today?
They were really good at observing, and they had a deep respect for nature. They saw these patterns over and over and tried to copy them in their art, their buildings, even how they understood time.
It makes sense they'd think these patterns were important, maybe even divine, like they were trying to be in tune with the universe. And speaking of patterns, it all goes back to those sacred numbers we talked about. Like 432, it's not just in Vedic time cycles, it's also the radius of the sun in miles. That can't be a coincidence, can it?
Right. And then there's 108. That's important in a lot of traditions. The moon's radius is 1080 miles. Old temples often have 108 towers. And there are 108 beads on a mala, those prayer beads.
It's like these numbers are clues leading us to a bigger understanding of how everything fits together. This is all so cool, but could it be that it's all just random? Or is there something more going on, like some kind of intentional design?
That's the question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But even if you think it's just interesting patterns, sacred geometry still makes you see the world in a new way.
I totally agree. It's like we've been looking at the world through a tiny window, And sacred geometry is opening it up, showing us how everything is connected.
And that bigger picture changes how we see ourselves, too. Remember that idea we talked about? That humans are connected to the cosmos? Like that Protagoras quote, man is the measure of all things. What do you think that means for sacred geometry?
Yeah, I remember. So we're not just watching the universe, we're part of it. We're like tiny reflections of the big picture. Our bodies, how we move, even how we measure things, it might all be in tune with these cosmic rules.
Exactly. It's not just that the universe is talking to us. We're talking back through how we exist. We're like talking examples of sacred geometry.
Whoa, that's deep and kind of cool. So learning about sacred geometry can make us feel more powerful.
It can. It shows us that we're all connected and that we're part of this amazing, complex universe. But this is a lot of info. How do we actually use it in our lives?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, but also a bit overwhelming. How do we take all this cosmic stuff and make it real?
Start small. Look for those patterns and proportions in your own life, your body, your relationships, even the choices you make every day. Are you living in balance? Are you creating harmony with others? Are you surrounding yourself with beauty and good energy?
So it's about being more aware, thinking about what we do and how it affects us and everything around us, like tuning in to that energy that connects us to something bigger.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can make your home more peaceful, use sacred geometry in your art or meditation, or even just go for a walk and really look at the patterns in nature.
Slow down, pay attention, and find those moments that remind you that we're all connected. But what about those catastrophes? It's hard to feel peaceful when you think about the world maybe ending.
It's a tough one. But maybe if we understand that these events happen in cycles, we can be ready for them instead of being scared and ignoring them.
So don't pretend they don't exist, but face them head on and be ready to rebuild. It's like those cycles aren't endings, they're chances to change and start fresh.
Exactly. And maybe even a little bit exciting. Sacred geometry reminds us that we're part of this giant web of life that's always changing. Things will always change, and accepting that can be a good thing.
This whole deep dive has been amazing, and I feel like I see the world differently now. It's like I'm seeing things I never noticed before.
That's the power of knowledge and exploration. It never ends. But here's one last thing to think about. If ancient people could hide so much knowledge in their buildings and measurements, imagine what else we might find if we learned to really understand the language of the universe.
Wow, that's a great point. And it makes me feel small but also excited, like we're just starting to understand a really big mystery. Thanks for guiding me through all this. I think this is just the beginning for me.
I think you're going to find some amazing things. Keep searching, keep asking questions, and stay curious. Until next time.
Welcome back. We've covered some seriously mind-blowing stuff, from hidden languages of numbers and shapes to, global catastrophes happening on a schedule.
It's been quite a journey, exploring this ancient wisdom, these cosmic mysteries. It connects us to something so much bigger.
My head's still spinning, but I'm trying to figure out how it all applies to me, to my everyday life. What's the takeaway from all this cosmic knowledge? How can we actually use these ideas in our lives?
That's the key question, and it's why sacred geometry keeps fascinating people. It's not just knowing stuff. It's about understanding where we fit in the universe and living in harmony with it.
So it's not just admiring a pretty sunflower or a pyramid, it's about using those same ideas in our own lives, finding that balance and harmony.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about the microcosm and macrocosm? If the universe is built on harmony and balance, maybe we can build those things inside ourselves too.
Okay, I get the connection. But how do we do that? What does it mean to actually live by sacred geometry every day?
It starts with paying attention. Notice the patterns in your own life, your body, your relationships, even the choices you make. Are you balanced? Are your interactions with others harmonious? Are you creating beauty and well-being around you?
So being more aware of the choices we make and how they affect everything around us. Tuning into that energy that connects us to something bigger.
Precisely. And it can be simple. Making your home a peaceful place. Using sacred geometry in your art or meditation. Or even just going for a walk in nature and really seeing the patterns.
Slowing down, paying attention, and finding those moments that remind you we're all connected. But what about those cycles of catastrophes? It's hard to think about harmony when you're worried about the world ending.
I know it's tough. But maybe if we understand that these things happen in cycles, we can be prepared instead of being scared and pretending they won't happen.
So we don't ignore them, we face them and get ready to rebuild. It's like seeing those cycles as chances to change and start over, not just endings.
Exactly. Maybe even something to be a little excited about sacred geometry. shows us that we're part of this huge web of life, always changing and evolving.
Hmm.
Change is going to happen, and knowing that can be a good thing.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I'm seeing the world with new eyes, like a whole new understanding has opened up.
That's the beauty of learning and exploring. It never stops. But here's a final thought for you. If ancient people could hide so much wisdom in their buildings and measurements, imagine what else we could discover if we learned to really read the language of the universe.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. It makes me feel small, but in a good way, like there's so much more to learn. Thanks for guiding me through this. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of my journey with sacred geometry.
And I have a feeling you're going to find some amazing things.
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never lose that sense of wonder. Until next time.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more explorations of the unknown. Stay curious, friends.